All right, so have you ever just sat there and thought, what if? Like really pondered some wild possibilities?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a huge what-if person. That's
Like,
how I end up in most of my research rabbit holes, honestly.
well, get ready to tumble down another one because today we're diving into some seriously thought-provoking stuff. We've got a mountain of sources here, articles, opinion pieces, even some really insightful perspectives straight from Taiwan.
Sounds intriguing. What's the big what-if we're tackling this time?
It's all about the relationship between Taiwan and the U.S., but with a twist. We're talking about the possibility of them taking a completely unexpected turn.
Okay, I'm all ears. A twist, you say?
Yeah, so we're going to focus on three big questions that have been swirling around, and frankly, they're the kind of questions that really get you thinking. First up, could Taiwan actually become the 51st U.S. state?
Wow, that's a big one. I mean, the implications of that would be enormous, right?
Absolutely. And that leads us to the second question. If Taiwan did become a state, what would happen to the new Taiwan dollar? Would it be all about the U.S. dollar all the time?
Interesting. And the third question?
Third, and this is a biggie too, is whether Taiwan would be better off just charting its own independent course, continuing to build its own path without being tied to another nation. Well, one of the most fascinating things we found is this idea, this perspective emerging in Taiwan, that there's already a kind of underlying connection with the U.S., almost like Taiwan is already an American territory kind of argument.
Really? An American territory, right?
Exactly. And this is where their argument gets interesting. They're saying that, when Japan surrendered, the transfer of Taiwan back to China, or more specifically to the Republic of China, ROC, well, they're arguing that it wasn't as clean-cut and internationally recognized as we might think.
Ah, so they're saying there's some ambiguity there.
Yeah. They believe it was more of an occupation than a legitimate transfer of sovereignty. And this ambiguity, this lack of crystal clear, internationally accepted transfer, is what they're using to fuel their Taiwan as American territory idea.
Okay, so how does that connect to the U.S.? What's their specific argument?
So they've got this whole proposal they call the IASHO, the U.S. territory of Taiwan Islands proposal. And it boils down to the idea that Taiwan has actually been an unincorporated territory of the United States ever since World War II ended.
Since World War II. That's a bold statement.
Right. It's not just some fringe theory either. They've actually built this whole legal argument by digging into all sorts of historical documents and international agreements.
Like what? What kind of documents are we talking about?
Oh, they go deep. They're citing the San Francisco Peace Treaty, the U.S.-China those agreements between the U.S. and China about the Taiwan Relations Act, and even parts of the U.S. Constitution.
Wow, the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, and then they layer on arguments based on the laws of war and broader international law. It's pretty comprehensive, And their conclusion, after pulling all of this together, is that Taiwan, in their view, automatically became a U.S. overseas territory all the way back then.
That's a lot to unpack. And it obviously plays into this larger discussion about Taiwan's potential future, including, as you said, the possibility of statehood.
Totally. And speaking of statehood, you should see some of the online reactions we found. There's this genuine hope among some folks that Taiwan could actually become the 51st state. I mean, I even saw comments like, finally, no more of those crazy expensive investment visas. Uncle Sam, here I come. Especially when it comes to things like public expression and, the relationship with mainland China.
Which then makes me wonder, is there something deeper going on here? I mean, beyond the legal and political arguments, is there a psychological aspect to this desire for statehood or even this tendency to look to other nations for a kind of protection?
That's where things get really fascinating, and the sources actually provide some interesting insights. You see these comments online, sometimes a bit tongue-in-cheek, but sometimes not. Things like, call America daddy or call Japan daddy. It kind of hints at this deeper yearning for security, maybe even a sense of belonging.
Like they're looking for a strong figure to provide guidance and protection.
Maybe. And the sources connect this to Taiwan's complex history, being ruled by the Qing dynasty, then Japan, then the arrival of the Kuomintang and the Republic of China. It's been one powerful entity after another.
So it's like this question of who's in charge and who do we look to for leadership has been a recurring theme throughout their history.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, it's led to this feeling, for some, of not fully being in control of their own destiny.
That makes sense. And speaking of feeling in control, our sources touch on the whole debate around the San Francisco Peace Treaty and the Taiwan status undetermined theory.
Yeah, that undetermined status really rubs some people the wrong way. They see it as painting Taiwan as this sort of orphan constantly in search of its rightful owner. Like, they can't just be their own entity.
That's interesting. So you've got this external debate about Taiwan's legal status, but then internally you've got this question of how Taiwanese people view themselves.
Right. And it's a bit of a paradox. I mean, Taiwan has had democratic elections for years, a vibrant civil society, but there's still this, I don't know, maybe hesitancy or unease about fully asserting their own identity on the world stage.
I see what you mean. Like even the idea of changing the name Republic of China to just Taiwan for some, that's a huge step.
Huge. And our source suggests it might be because of this concern about how China or the U.S. would react. Like, they're still looking to these bigger powers for approval.
It's like they're stuck in this middle ground, wanting to assert their own identity, but worried about the consequences.
Totally. And what makes it even more striking is how other countries and international organizations are starting to recognize Taiwan more explicitly.
Oh, yeah. Like Canada adding Taiwan as an option in its census? That was a pretty big deal, considering the potential backlash from China.
Exactly. And the U.S. Congress is pushing to make sure maps used by the U.S. government don't lump Taiwan in with China.
So there's this movement toward recognizing Taiwan's distinct identity, but internally, there's still some division.
Totally. It's like this internal tug of war. On the one hand, you've got the international community saying, hey, Taiwan, you're your own thing. But then within Taiwan, you've got this segment of the population that still very much identifies with a broader Chinese heritage, this idea of common culture, same origin, one family.
So then who's applying for statehood, hypothetically? Is it the Republic of China, which, still claims mainland China and Hong Kong in its constitution? Or is it Taiwan, this separate entity that's still grappling with its identity?
Right. It's such a messy situation. And that's where the whole constitutional issue comes into play. I mean, every U.S. state has its own constitution, right? But Taiwan is still operating under a constitution designed for a completely different time and place.
Yeah, a time when they claimed mainland China and Hong Kong as part of their territory.
Exactly. Our source calls it abnormal. And honestly, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. So trying to cram that existing framework into the U.S. system, well, it would be incredibly complicated, to say the least.
So realistically, becoming the 51st state with its current constitutional setup seems pretty much impossible.
Pretty much. And that leads us to the final and maybe most important perspective we found in our sources, the arguments for Taiwan just staying independent. And at the heart of it all is this question of Taiwan's own evolving identity. And you know what? Regardless of whether they join the U.S., stay independent, or something else entirely, the most important thing is that they get to decide their own future.
And that brings us back to that original question we started with. What if? What if Taiwan could truly chart its own course? What would that look like? What challenges would they face? What triumphs would they achieve?
Those are the questions we want to leave you with. It's about more than just politics. It's about a people defining their own destiny. And that's a story worth paying attention to, no matter what path they choose.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been quite a journey.
Until next time.